Hi, everyone, and welcome to our November edition of Lion Marketers. Thank you for joining us. We have a great session coming up today with brilliant speakers from across the industry. And the topic is all about what makes highly effective and creative marketing teams so great. Please do ask questions in the chat throughout, and we will get to as many of them as possible. I will hand over to our wonderful moderator shortly to introduce everyone. But one point before we begin, Lion's State of Creativity study is back. You can see on this slide, the Lion State of Creativity is back for 2024, and it plays a crucial role in uncovering what lies ahead for creativity in business. And this year, the focus is on creative effectiveness in action. Just scan the QR code you can see on the screen here, and it takes a maximum of 15 minutes to fill the survey, and you will have the chance, guess what, to win an in-person or digital pass to the Cannes Lion Festival of Creativity next year. You will need to fill this survey in one go. Don't forget, because if you stop and start, it won't save your place. So just something to remember while you're filling it. So now, without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to our wonderful moderator, Laura Baccare. Laura Baccare is an Anthem award-winning inclusive marketing strategist, creator of the hashtag Responsible Marketing Movement, advisory board member at Sparks and Honey, and founder of Biko, a boutique consultancy that empowers brands and marketing leaders with strategic guidance, coaching, training, and workshops that unleash new level of success. Laura's first book, Responsible Marketing: How to Create an Authentic and Inclusive Marketing Strategy, is in the works with Kogan Page for a July 2024 release. So stay tuned. Lola, over to you and our wonderful speakers.
Thank you so much, Fiorenza. What a lovely introduction. I'm humbled and honored and so excited to be here today to just facilitate what I know is going to be a brilliant conversation with three of the world's most accomplished marketing leaders on super exciting brands. So without further ado, I'm excited to jump into introductions. So first on the panel, we have Sophia Colucci, Chief Marketing Officer at Molson Coors. Sophia is a results-driven senior marketing executive with an exceptional track record managing CPG businesses across multiple industries and countries. She is seasoned and passionate as a leader and has extensive marketing experience, including turnarounds, award-winning creative, which we're going to see some of today. As I'm going to rattle through these many awards of the last couple of years, in 2019 was named 40 Under 40 Cranes. 2021 was honored with the Female Frontier Award from Campaign US. Was in 2021 one of Brand Innovators Women to Watch. 2023 one of the top 50 CMOs by Campaign US, and in 2023 as well one of the top 100 women in brand marketing by Brand Innovators. So amazing. Sophia, it's so awesome to have you here today. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And we love the jacket. I hear it's made in my hometown of Philly.
Yeah, it's a partnership with Mitchell and Ness. You know, if I can't be cool, I can wear cool merch from Miller. So, you know, rocking it today.
I think we think the jacket is cool and you're cool. All right. And then coming to us amazingly committedly from jury duty is Victoria Jardin, Vice President of Marketing at the Kraft Heinz Company, who, as we all saw, completely cleaned up last year at the festival. Victoria is a highly motivated self-starter with 17 years of consumer marketing experience, passionate about driving strategic and sustainable growth of brands with a proven track record of global market success. She has strong consumer insight focus and an outstanding mix of development expertise for both developed and developing markets. She also brings substantial experience of delivering complex projects through global project management and strategic influencing skills, so important as a marketing leader, and excellent leadership and communication skills, which I'm sure we're all going to see the benefit of today in the discussion. and also experience building and leading large culturally diverse teams and agency relationships, something extremely close to my heart. Vicki, thank you so much for being here. How's it going?
Thank you so much. I'm very much looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. And lastly, with one of my favorite backgrounds on these Zooms, the books, is Mark Visser, Global Practice Lead of Organizational Performance at Kantar. Mark is a seasoned commercial executive and consultant with more than 25 years of experience in the international fast-moving consumer goods arena, with an extensive track record developing and managing all commercial functions with an emphasis on marketing and branding. Mark is known for his proven ability to grow brands and businesses and lead cross-functional teams in the most challenging circumstances. He has applied analytical and creative skills to develop clear and concise strategies that work on a local and a pan-European scale. His experience across the entire whole value chain is notable, and he's developed successful teams and coached individuals to achieve their highest performance. He has also developed commercial capabilities in both sales and marketing. And I love this. Mark is smart, resourceful, energetic, and fun. And fun is really the bottom line, right? Like, we get to do the most exciting job in the world. And I love that we underscore that in how we introduce ourselves. So Mark, thank you so much for being here. How's it going?
Thanks, Lola. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to today.
Awesome. Well, of course, this is Lion, so it would only make sense if we start by getting inspired by seeing the actual work. So the team has put together an awesome reel. We're going to start by seeing some of the work that comes out of highly creative marketing teams run by those on this call. So the first piece we're going to see is Chillboards by Molson Coors, who took home a bronze in the outdoor lions and a silver in the industry craft lions. And then we're going to see Draw Ketchup by Kraft Heinz, which took home 4 lions, including a gold in the creative strategy and print publishing. So without further ado, let's see the work.
Extreme heat is a challenge in cities worldwide. I'm Jane Gilbert. I'm the Chief Heat Officer for Miami-Dade County. We have far more days over 90 degrees than we had just a few decades ago. Black roofs can get up to 170 degrees, affecting everyone who lives under them. Painting roofs with special white paint can reflect 85% of sunlight, lowering surface temperatures by up to 50 degrees.
We're always having to keep the air on, and having that on all day is expensive.
I've never seen ads on top of the roof where it's helping the community.
We're working on policies at the state level to encourage cool and white roofs. These chill boards raise people's awareness all over the world, and that's a great thing. I'd love to see this on more roofs across America.
Ketchup? Ketchup? I'm in way over my head.
You want me to draw ketchup?
Okay.
Ketchup?
Food, ketchup bottle or something.
That's not a ketchup bottle. That's a shampoo.
Heinz.
Heinz bottle.
Heinz ketchup bottle.
Got a little bit old school.
If you were asked to draw ketchup, what would you draw?
This
And
is
are there other brands besides
Heinz
Heinz?
ketchup.
Heinz ketchup. They're one and the same.
So good.
That's mustard.
It's like the only ketchup that I know of.
Gotta love that. The proof is in the pudding, or shall we say the ketchup bottle. It's the only ketchup I know. I just love that, coming from a consumer. Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's dive in. Thank you so much, Lions team, for putting together that awesome reel. So we want to talk first about skills and culture. And the theme of this session is all about the habits of highly creative marketing teams, the sorts of teams that can create work like we just saw. So I want to start with you, Vicky, since we just saw the reel from you. What are the key skills of a marketing team that delivers growth by driving creativity? And you know, I'd love to come at that from what you're seeing on your team, but also the skills that you're trying to develop and really focus on.
Well, I think first of all, it's understanding the value of creativity, the financial value, the business value, right? Because marketeers who are very clear of the growth for their brands and for their business tend to be able to advocate for that in the business at large. And for those of us in the business of creativity now, it in many instances getting big ideas that are brave and then require cross-functional buy-in, support, help. So the first thing is you need to understand the value in the business case for creativity. I think the second thing is you need to have a healthy dose of empathy and curiosity, because creativity, it's not a science, right? It's situational. It depends on culture. It depends on what's happening in the world. And so you really need to have a very relevant and contemporary external perspective. And then I would say the third thing is you need to be brave and you need to be bold, but you also need to be incredibly disciplined. Because simply having a great idea on paper or something that you think can do incredible things for your brand and for your business, consumers today are faced with so many communications, right? Not only commercial communications on news, but we're all creators these days. So not only having that ability to see and understand what's relevant, but then to bring that to life, with algorithms, with ecosystems, with a whole bunch of stuff that goes with it. So, when we think about creativity, it's the business of creativity. It's creativity that's relevant and in the world, and then being able to manifest that, for your brand in the best, most effective possible way.
I love that. And I think that's one of the things that's so impressive about both of the pieces of work we just saw. There's an incredible level of consumer involvement that's really at the cultural pulse, just in a sort of, from the Heinz standpoint, the fun of the brand and the resonance of the brand. But if we move on to the Molson Coors example, that the sort of responsible marketing angle was the touch point, but consumers were at the front of each. So I'd love to hear from you as well, Sophia. How did you get to that point of being able to sell, like Vicky is just sharing with us, the business case of such a creative but also responsible marketing driven idea that, of course, we all know came together so beautifully?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, when I look at that example, or really any of our initiatives that we put out into the world and creative initiatives, like there's a certain criteria, whether they're big or small, that we have to really think about. The first is making sure, like, does it reinforce your brand's point of view? Is this something? So for Coors Light, we are made to chill. So we think about that, and everything we put out into the world needs to be ownable. It needs to really reflect that. The second thing is, like, do we have the credibility to do something like this, right? And so with Coors Light, we have, especially for purpose-driven initiatives, we have a long history of sustainability. And so for us, if we're going to put an action out there in the world, we have to have, examples of things that we've done in the world. We were actually, the first brand to launch the aluminum can. And when we figured out how to do that, we didn't keep it to ourselves. We actually let every beer manufacturer actually take that technology. And so because it was more sustainable. So it's that brand point of view, making sure it reinforces your brand point of view, making sure that you have a real right to do it. And then the third thing, as we think about these types of initiatives, and will people give a shit? It's like, will it actually resonate in culture? And usually we say that word and we put a little S with a dollar sign so that I'm actually not saying it. But it's true, right? We need to make sure that when we launch things in culture, it's similar to what Vicky was saying. People are inundated with so many things right now. And so we need to make sure that the work we do is going to land in culture and it's going to make people talk about it, right? But you can't just do creativity for creativity's sake. You need to make sure that it's actually driving your brand point of view. And whether it's purpose-driven work, like what I showed you there, we also actually do a lot of just more fun in culture work that reinforces our brand's point of view. Like for Miller Lite, we're all about great taste and less filling. And we have like a real beer point of view. And we do a lot of fun things in culture, but it's always really pushing on that criteria that I talked about.
I love that. I think the unification of the criteria from purpose through the more entertainment focused sort of stuff is so key. And I also want to really celebrate you, Sophia, for nailing another part that's really tough about this, which is making sure what you're doing from a purpose-driven perspective solves a real and relevant problem that means
correct.
Something
Correct.
At the catalyst level, right? You talked about the cans, but also this chillboards idea. That's something that can create catalytic change. And so I think it's super important and a cornerstone of how this work gets done that people on the call can really learn from. Mark, I'd love to go over to you. We know that Kantar recently released this amazing BrandZ study. So along the lines of this conversation, from that, what learnings do you have about the leadership behaviors that create the strength of creativity in these brands?
Yeah, there was maybe two things I wanted to say. So there was another study we did around Insights 2030, looking at how important consumer customer centricity is. And it is really important if you want to grow. One of the things that really came out there is this whole notion of imagination. So even beyond campaigns, if the question is about how do you drive creative marketing teams, imagination, anticipating the future, especially if we live in so disruptive time, is going to be a critical difference. The ability to be connected to culture, as just was said, to have scenarios about the future and to prioritize areas where you can act and you can unleash your creativity too, is going to become very critical. If you then look at the type of behaviors that drive, for example, a campaign to be truly connected to growth and for it to drive growth, one thing is about, and I think you talked about it, the clarity, but I think an important thing is also the consistency. So I love what Sophia said, the brand is all about chill. There is something about consistency in the campaign over time. We found wear out is actually very hard to prove it exists, where in does. So to be consistent over time, over a longer period of time, is going to make your creativity more effective. If you're on top of that, can be very connected across all the touch points where you execute, where you adapt to the context, it's further going to heighten the impact of that creativity. If you're then willing to keep on optimizing, have an agile team that continuously keeps on optimizing what works and what doesn't work, if you bring those three behaviors together, you probably get even more out of excellence creativity than if you would run, I don't know, like a once-off single initiative.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I like to talk about, I just talked about this yesterday at the Reuters conference when I presented on responsible marketing. The 3 C's that are super important are that consistency, conviction, and candor, being willing to be open. And I love that, Mark, you're taking us into this place of skill building. The next question dives into emotional intelligence and how the 3 of you as leaders are really building that as a skill and as a capability for yourself and your teams. Vicky, you want to talk to us a little bit about that piece?
Yeah, let me talk in the context of how we think about competencies and then specifically creativity. So We do have a competency framework, right? What we believe the skills are that our marketeers will need not only for now, but in the future. And within that, we have a program called Accelerating Creative Excellence, which really is helping our teams in two ways. So for our leaders, for our marketing directors, our CMOs, there's masterclasses which are helping them lead the process of creativity. Again, because you don't just kind of come up with a big idea and say, great, job done, off we go. And so helping our leaders have the emotional intelligence, but also the skills to be able to, in many instances, first find that magic dust, right? And then bring teams, be they external agency partners, internal teams, with them along that journey, is as important as the emotional intelligence that I think traditionally we think of as marketeers with social listening, understanding of your consumers, of your customers. And so whether that is through masterclasses for the process of creativity and inspiration, we certainly like to bring our partners and benchmark best in class. We spend a lot of time talking about what we like about other brands' work, what we think is great, what we would have perhaps done differently. And then for our marketing community, again, that process of creativity, how to brief with excellence, how to even think about really articulating what is your job to be done, what are you trying to achieve, and very practical tools, techniques. And so all of those things together, being able to identify creative boldness, excellence, be able to lead for it and through it, and then very practical and helpful tools for our marketeers to be able to do it. All of these things together are increasing our ability and our appetite to drive that creative effectiveness.
Love that. Thank you so much. And it comes out in the simplicity of the execution we saw with that Heinz campaign. So I think that's really instructive for everyone listening on the call. So Sophia, anything to add there? What are your thoughts on the approach to skill building?
No, I mean, I love the way Vicki laid it out. And I think, it's almost a combination of also what Mark was talking about too. We've learned a lot over the last number of years as we've been building out our horsepower from a marketing creative perspective. And, what we really realize is it's so important to learn from the things that we've done well and some of the mistakes that we've made, and be able to then provide our marketers with the tools in terms of how to be excellent creative leaders. So a good example that I would say is, and I've talked about it openly, is we learned a lot on Miller Lite over the years. And I think there was a time, and especially probably during the pandemic, when we were a little bit more random about the work that we were putting out there. It was very creative, but it wasn't consistent. It wasn't connected to a larger platform. It was certainly maybe winning some awards, but I don't think it was driving the brand as much. And, it took a lot of reflection and honestly accountability and a bit of a growth mindset for us to look back and reflect on the things that were or weren't working. And then we actually started to take that and build out more of a playbook and a framework, which was hey, our brands need to have, a strong brand point of view. In our case, it was Tastes Like Miller Time, which was, iconic and reflective of the brand's DNA. The second thing is, we are in a business that is complex with multiple touch points. And to the point that Mark was saying, and Vicki said it too, is we need to make sure that everything that we do for our brand is connected at all different touch points. As we think about the different work that we're putting out there in the world, how is it still creative? How does it still land with consumers, but making sure that it's effective, that we sweat the assets? And it doesn't mean that we don't have opportunities to bring really interesting creative brand acts out to the world. I'll give you an example. We put out, we have a campaign on Tastes Like Miller Time, which is hardworking, and we launch it, during we have it on TV during football, but at the same time, during Christmas, we'll launch things like Christmas tree keg stands, which is literally a keg stand with Miller Lite, because it's celebrating people's love for beer and tasting like Miller time. And it's just what we've done, though, is as we've learned on brands like Miller Lite, we've taken that framework and that learning and we've applied it to other brands as well too, because it's so important for us to be able to not just have it on one brand, but be able to give our marketers the toolkit to be able to launch that creativity out in the world for other brands too.
I love that. And I think it dovetails nicely into the next question. You both talked about the importance of your team's role in this and both evaluating the effectiveness of the work, but also perhaps feeling safe to take risks and take chances. And Mark, studying, this from an advisory perspective at Kantar, can you start off by sharing a little bit with us on your advice for how marketing leaders can create sort of a safe to fail space and culture in their teams? And I'd love to hear as well from Vicky and Sophia on what that looks like for the teams that you're leading.
Yeah, maybe two thoughts to share. So I think one thing where we see where companies do an effective transformation towards creativity, really embracing and celebrating creativity, I think there's a big role for leaders to play and for leaders to be very vocal about it and really putting it on the agenda and the importance and celebrating great work. So I think for leadership, there is an important role to really put it high on the agenda and really celebrate it. I think you're also talking about risk-taking. I think we rather talk about experimentation and sort of careful experimentation. And I think the good news is that with agile tools entering the market, with now AI, which maybe we can separately discuss, I think the opportunities to very quickly experiment, to learn, to test out different ideas without maybe already immediately committing millions of dollars, I think has dramatically increased. So I think your ability to experiment and use risk and experimentation as a way to quickly learn and improve, it's probably never been better than it is today.
Yes. Vicky, I see your mind working there. Any thoughts to add? I love that frame from risk-taking to experimentation. It just makes it feel even safer.
Yeah, I think as Mark said, it's having leaders who are willing to recognize creativity. So, we have internal creativity awards, we have ACE awards, ahead of the external award season. And our CEO hosts them. Our executive leadership team all come and cheer virtually, in real life for their teams. And so it's not just the marketeers in our organization saying, creativity is important. Our CEO, Miguel Patricio, talks about a culture of creativity. And so for our marketeers, it's not something that we say, but we don't spend time or attention to. We truly believe it. It comes from our CEO down. And so marketeers believe and are recognized internally as much for the campaigns that win ACE, but we also celebrate our internal shortlists. And I think that is so incredibly important. I think the other thing, as Sophia said, is if you truly understand your brands, and this goes back to competence, right? What do you need to be highly effective and creative? You actually need to have incredibly strong foundations, those evergreen brand frameworks, if you will. What is your positioning? What does your brand believe in? What does it stand for? What does it value? Because if you understand that and you have that understanding, again, for global brands, you're talking across, geography, across culture. But if all of you share that understanding of the brand, it's actually easier to be brave because you're doing it from a place of positioning, values and beliefs, and therefore that's the lens that you're judging creative through. And it becomes much easier to say, okay, this definitely is aligned to what my brand believes, what my brand stands for. As Sophia said, these campaigns for brands are not things which we do, just for 1 year. To go back 50 years, 100 years, in the case of Heinz, Henry J. Heinz himself pioneered the Pure Food Act. That bottle, it's so distinctive. The fact that we can make things like Draw Ketchup, Ketchup AI, that's 150 years of consistent, solid, distinctive positioning. And so therefore, in some ways, it becomes a lot easier to kind of play with those things and be brave because you truly do believe and understand inherently. what's right and not right for the brand.
Love that. So important. Sophia, anything to add on this topic?
Yeah, no, I love everything that's been said. And I think, I think the other thing too that we really like to do, I guess there's two things. One is I believe momentum begets momentum, in the sense of when teams start this kind of cycle of getting out there, taking, I don't know if it was calculated risks, but going forward and taking swings. Yeah. Yes. It just drives confidence and it drives energy, and it's fun. And so whether it might not be perfect, but it makes people believe. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing that we try to do too is we try to very actively celebrate both the things that delivered what we expected, and then also celebrate the things that maybe didn't actually deliver what we expected, but that we learned from. And we really try to champion those things and make people feel proud of them. So we've launched so many brand hacks out in the world that didn't necessarily deliver on everything we wanted. But one of the things that we really try to coach our associate marketing managers or managers, especially people that are, maybe doing these things for the first time, is celebrate everything that they learned, everything that they accomplished along the way, and the learnings they can take for the next time. And, sometimes like I'll be in meetings with our marketers and people are getting stressed out, and sometimes even saying, you know what, it's fine. It doesn't matter. Our brand is going to be okay. Just, I think they kind of, take a step back, because we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves and things can get really intense. But sometimes they need to hear that, like, you need just some perspective to say it's okay if everything didn't work out exactly the way you wanted it to work out.
I love that. And celebrating, the non-successful things. I find that that's a distinctive trait of marketing leaders who have highly energized teams. There's no fear, because you know that you're not going to be judged on the success. It's always going to be a gamble. Okay, so I want to take it in a little bit more of a personal direction, and then we'll answer Letitia's question before we move on to the next section. But lastly, on skills and culture, let's get a little bit personal, and whoever's ready first, jump in, because this is a bit more, of a deep personal question. What are the things that you individually as leaders are working on that you'd like to share to become more effective? Or a thing.
I can go. I think as you become, maybe if I can put seniority and age together, seniority and age, I think I'm finding that in some ways I'm becoming further away, certainly from some of the younger consumer bases. And so being very humble and, actually using, my immediate network. So there's quite sometimes like I'll message my niece, who's wonderful. She's just turned 18. And I'm like, so of these kind of influencers, like, who do you think I should look at on Instagram, or can you help me understand what this is? And look, I think doing that, and I'm giving an example, a personal example, because it's, it's very easy for me to ask my niece, but to also be humble and to be unafraid to do that more broadly. So, the big scary AI, what are we doing in a way that makes sense, not only for our own personal learning, but how are we helping the organization take steps in places that it may be less familiar or less comfortable, or may not even think it's relevant. Certainly we do think AI is relevant, and we do have a number of programs and studies at the moment. But I think ensuring that your worldview doesn't become narrowed or too linear, and that could be related to, platforms or gaming or, even language, seeing the world through an English speaking lens. How does that work if you speak a language that perhaps isn't dubbed or isn't subtitles or culturally works differently? So taking very tangible but very small steps to consciously go, I don't understand that, or I'm not even sure I have an opinion on that yet, and therefore educating myself through self-learning, through, asking others and being kind of humble enough to say, I honestly have no idea. I would love to get your opinions. If you've got something I can read, look at, try, sign up for. I think that's a great way for me personally to make that learning quite tangible and real world practical.
I love that humility and openness. It's so refreshing. Sophia, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, the list of things I don't know about that I need to learn, we could spend the next 20 minutes talking about it. But look, like when I think about just the role I get to have in this organization, like there's just foundational things. Like if you look at our passion points, like we have 16 NFL alliances. I had to admit to the team when I joined, I know nothing about football. So please help me. I need to learn. So that's just like being open and transparent with those things. I think it's, to Vicky's point, the second thing I would say is just having that constant learner mindset, because again, like we can't be stagnant. We can't just, assume that things that we were doing a year ago or 2 years ago are going to be okay. Like we have to continue to have that intellectual curiosity and challenge ourselves and take learnings from what inspires us and, push ourselves in our organization. So I think the third thing I would say, and this goes more on the people side and what I'm really trying to do as I think about being a good leader, is every day and in every conversation, just trying to be empathetic, to remind myself of the person that I'm speaking with and how they might be feeling. Because I think that we can forget. And I remind myself that too. Like, I can get caught up in the fact that I'm in a million meetings and there's a whole bunch of things that are happening. But the person that, I'm meeting with, like, worked really hard to build, like, probably the biggest deck in one of the most important meetings that they have this month, with our senior leadership team, and being respectful and supportive of them. And like, how do you make sure that they feel that you are like actually, you understand and you're internalizing how they're feeling and, all the work that they've put in. So it's that constant empathy that I want to continue to remind myself of, just because I know how important it is.
It's super. I mean, I know your team watching is going to love hearing that. It's a great perspective to have and makes people feel so valued. Thank you so much. Okay, Mark, before we move on to the next section, any thoughts on this idea of sort of, I mean, you're surrounded by books, so we know you have a learning mindset, but for you, what does this look like?
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot that's being said. I think on the one hand, I think it's about staying current and finding some dedicated space in your agenda to stay on top of topics. At the moment, it's AI. Who knows what it's next month? But it's definitely making the time to read up, to be inspired by other people, to be inspired by podcasts, by whatever it is. And then I've got the advantage of having three teenagers at home, so a little bit similar to what Vicky was telling. At least that's a way to stay connected to a younger target audience. I think when it comes to the teams, I noticed that we got a lot of very young people in the team. And I think what motivates them in work and why they show up at work and what they want to get out of it has changed over time. And it's affecting the whole team. But it does mean it's very important to consciously carve out time to sit with them, to engage, get their feedback, get their feet forward, get their ideas, how we can improve things. So I think we take more conscious time to sit with individuals in the team or maybe groups of teams and pick up a topic and really explore what would they recommend for us to improve. And that all in the context of, this sounds maybe too straightforward, just how can we increase happiness? We at a quarterly basis try to look into what's the happiness of the team, and is the happiness of the team improving? And then try to pick up every quarter at least one thing we can do to tangibly make everybody's life a little bit better.
Love that. Oh my gosh. Amazing way to wrap up this section. So we do have a question from the audience that also is sort of relevant to the first plan question in the structure and process section. So I'm going to do my best to wrap those two together. Rakib, thank you for your question. Now in this phase of the conversation, we want to talk about the conditions or processes that you focus on to make creativity and innovation flourish on your team. So with that, Rakib's question specifically was, how permanent is a brand's space or positioning? How can you tell if your brand needs to refresh its space or positioning? And I think there's kind of a thread there as far as the process and structure of conditions for success and evaluating the ongoing relevance of positioning. So I'll throw that out there as a just provocation to the group. Does that resonate with any of you? Is something you want to share thoughts on?
I love to say something about it. So we did a lot of work on this, and the first thing to note is that there's a fundamental difference between small and big brands. So if you're a small brand, you still have a lot to gain from getting people that are already bought into the category switching to you. If you're a big brand, you got another challenge, because for big brands, growth will come from either removing frequency barriers, or it will come from actually getting new buyers into the category. And that means probably you need to innovate. When it comes to the question, when it comes to brand positioning, 99 out of 100 times, I would say positioning is almost timeless. There's very few occasions when there's a need to completely change the positioning. The execution, the brand planning, the targeting, whether you need to go after a new occasion, I think that has to be much more timely. Being on top of culture with your execution, I think that's where you want to be in tune. Where is my true growth opportunity, and how do I best execute against that? So I would say the positioning, I mean, and I love that we have Heinz here. I mean, don't touch it. The way you execute it and keep it relevant and keep it current, especially if you're a big brand, if you're already quite dominant in your category, if you got maybe already half of the penetration of the total of all the category users, you need to start doing some really thing to find new space to grow.
Thank you.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Oh, sorry, Vicky, you were gonna.
I think we all fully agree with that, right? I was gonna say, products do things and brands mean things. And the brands that I think all of us would aspire and recognize, are timeless, right? Their values and the beliefs are timeless. Now, how they show up, how a brand shows up, it needs to be timely in culture, right? But brands which are constructed well, are, I mean, Heinz, 150 years. I'm sure, Sophia, your brand's, hundreds of years as well. So, there's a tendency, I think, for marketeers to want to be bored too quickly. It goes back to distinctive assets, consistency, right? Like, these are brands which endure because they are imbued in meaning. They are values led, they are beliefs led, and so if you have an issue, it's not likely to be your brand positioning if you built the brand well.
I think somebody's off mute.
On your way.
On mute, please. P. Davis.
I was going to go over and get him myself, so Alex had him tonight, and he could.
And let me see if we can
see Teddy.
Someone at Lions.
On Teams, you can just mute him, but there you go.
Yeah, hang on.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, we'll go from panelist to muted extraordinary. And so with that, to Sophia, who I think, we're brand builders, right? So we've seen what consistency and solidity can do. Sophia.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's funny because it's like going back to just thinking about distinct assets and just a history of a brand and not running away from it. So I think, we have the fortune across Molson Coors to have lots of brands like that. And, a good example is, Miller High Life, which was actually launched in 1903. And it was launched as the champagne of beers. And over the years, it continued to, push on that. It's a value beer, and it has a tongue-in-cheek champagne of beers. And over the years too, what we saw was that it really, started to build in culture in dive bars, just because it was less expensive, but had kind of like that cool factor. And so, to Vicky's point, rather than running away from that, like, how do we think of culturally relevant and modern ways to bring that to life? So, a couple of years ago, we started launching brand acts into the world that celebrated our home of dive bars. So we launched, during the pandemic, a backyard dive bar by Miller High Life, because you couldn't go to bars, so instead go to your backyard. We followed it up over Christmas with how there's like gingerbread kits that people make kits over the holidays. It was a gingerbread Miller High Life dive bar kit. And it's just like, but again, it's like, how do you find what your connection is in culture, going back to the roots of your brand? So having that point of view, and then finding consistent and creative ways to continue to, build your brand's point of view reach consumers in culturally relevant ways that people care about. So I think we've got actually some of the links in the chat there too of some of those examples. So totally agree with what Mark and Vicky are saying.
So cool. And Mark, I heard you jump in there. Do you have something else to add on this? Or maybe I don't.
I think we talk a lot about distinctiveness. Personally, we would say it's also about differentiation. So it's also about being perceived as different and setting the trend. So beyond just having functional distinctive assets, I think it's also worth, and I think Vicky sort of said that, building an emotional connection with the brand. And to be honest, because I think the question was, when do I need to refresh? In Kantar language, if you don't have meaningful difference, so if you lose your relevance to consumers, if you're not perceived as setting the trend or being ahead of others, you definitely need to do something about refreshing your execution, but not your positioning.
Thank you, Mark. So let's continue to get some of the Kantar magic on the table here. Someone in our initial prep had just added this question, I believe, from the Lions team, which I love. Mark, can you share, in the view of the brands Kantar has studied, what you found to be the most effective as far as sort of the ways of working, if you will, that lead to creative success? Does anything come to mind there?
Maybe two things to address. I think we already talked a lot about competency building and training, but I do think it's worthwhile to invest in sort of a common language and common approach, how you do things, and being quite articulate about what your beliefs are when it comes to building the brand, when it comes to what sort of creativity works, how do you get a return on creativity. We did a fun experiment once, asking CMOs and marketeers what they thought was driving return on creativity, return on advertising. And what came out of it is that a lot of marketeers at number 1 and 2 said, well, you really need to solve digital. You really need to solve your media mix. That's really important if you want to drive a return. You really need to get this balance between the long and the short of it. The brand building and the execution need to get that right. And those are not unimportant, but they're in number 4 and 5. What's most important is put your money behind your big brands. The bigger the brand, the higher the return, which might not be a very popular thing. But like even listening last week to Unilever's shareholder announcement, I think one part was we need to even double down and invest more behind our big brands. The second thing, not surprisingly in this context, is creativity. Getting the right creative, investing in really exploring the most effective creative is going to be a massive multiplier to get your return. Much more than getting it right across touch points or the balance. And then the final thing is really how you allocate your budgets across geographies. And in that sense, coming to the team side of things, I think two things to observe. One thing is I think a lot of companies tend to rationalize the number of brands they invest behind and are looking for more scale. So the complexity to manage a brand across a number of categories, across a number of countries has dramatically increased over the last couple of years. And that brings a lot of complexity because although the positioning is consistent, with 70% of your spend in digital and where context matters, to actually then get a consistent execution across all your categories and across all your countries, that in itself really requires a different organizational setup. The other thing is with the explosion of touch points, also the number of partners you work with has exploded. So we see an increasing need for an orchestrator because you see in most marketing departments, if you go 10 years back, you see from a vast majority of generalists, you see a vast majority of specialists. So the role of having an orchestrator, somebody that really owns the brand clarity and that really then can actually orchestrate the whole team and all their specialists and get all those specialists getting to fruition is then becoming disproportionately important because you're working with so many different people within your company, but also with partners. And probably the way you partner with agencies has become, in addition, important. So getting a good orchestrator.
Yeah, I love that. The thread between an orchestrator, helping to draw the line between the generalists and the specialists. Maybe we can use that to continue a bit more of discussion on this team structure piece. So I know everybody just took a note on that. I did. Thank you, Mark. For you, Vicky, is there anything that comes up as far as like a team structure insight that you think is really important here?
I think, as Mark said, and it goes back, Lola, to your question at the beginning, right? Emotional intelligence. And so you really do need, I believe, that combination of emotional intelligence and leadership in uncertainty, right? With a healthy dose of discipline, because there is an element of creativity there is algorithms and pipes. I call it the pipes. and sizing and framing, and do you have the right formats for everything? And I still truly believe that the other thing when it comes to, finding those big, bold ideas, creativity by committee is a bad plan. Now, it doesn't mean that there's not multiple teams, multiple partners, as Mark said, involved. But, creativity is not a democratic process. It's not. Like death by 1,000 cuts never produced, in my experience, anything, that consumers will stop and notice, never mind award winning. And so I do believe that, those incredibly strong foundations and being very clear on, who is the decision maker of this idea, for the better or the worse. Is there, as Sophia said, some stuff you're like, you know what? Thank you so much for the due diligence. And, as CMO, that may be, using so much resource or with a profile that I will sign it off. There could be some assets or some executions that maybe a senior brand manager signs off or a brand manager signs off. But being super clear on that, I think is so incredibly important, because otherwise it just causes so much frustration for the team, for agency partners. And then it is a team sport, I do believe, to, manage that idea within so many different ways. So quite different skills or responsibilities, but I think both incredibly important for creativity to turn out well and be effective.
Thank you, Vicky. Sophia, anything to add there? I see you nodding and smiling along.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and yes. I mean, when we think about it on our end too, we've encountered a lot of this. And I think when we think of optimal team structures, like it is a balance of having leaders who can help drive the agenda and be decisive and be able to push for those bold ideas. And to that point, sometimes like it's a smaller group that does that, and that's okay. But then having the right processes and structures in place so that you bring your cross-functional partners along so they can help execute it, so they also feel bought in. And when we are working on initiatives in our company, we have a 3-tier system because we're selling beer across multiple channels. We're working across globally, and so if we kind of let everyone kind of come up with their own creative ideas and try to brainstorm across all functions, it wouldn't work well. And similar to what Vicky is saying, it'd almost be like the lowest common denominator. So we actually have to have some conviction to say, this is how we're going to do it. And then find those frameworks and playbooks to be able to localize things or make things work in relevant markets. And it's something that we have gotten better at and we're really pushing to do.
Thank you, Sophia. Amazing. Okay, so I can't believe we only have 5 minutes left, but luckily we have a question from the audience that very much aligns to the last question that we'd sort of planned to approach. And now we're going to dig into, and this was mentioned in the last 2 answers, the importance of collaboration and synergy. I think a great way to close and inspire everybody listening as they go back into their workday. So Fernando asks, have you encountered leadership that questions the value of a brand or branding efforts? How do you overcome that? And the sort of additional piece that you might already be thinking about is, what are the best practices that keep that alignment across the team beyond marketing?
I can go. I think it goes to Mark's point, right? We have incredible partners with a body of evidence, be that in looking at the effectiveness of individual assets or campaigns, or marketing mix modeling. And so I think you need to be super clear up front. What are your objectives? How will the creativity be measured? Will it be measured on earned potential? If you're in the business of funnels, is it click-through rates? Is it leads? But being very clear and aligning up front with your team and with your wider leadership, what do we need this to do? And then secondly, over what time period is it reasonable to expect it to do it? So modeling, investment for growth, sufficiency levels, resource allocation, because whilst, if my memory serves correct, brand size is the number one predicator of success. I think creativity is the second. Sufficiency in media is up there as well. So be super clear what it is you're trying to do. Be very honest then, as Sophia said, some stuff everybody wins, it's great. Some stuff doesn't work so well. But if you're clear on the KPIs, you can say, this is great because it did this and it over-delivered. Or, we tried, but actually, it looked nice, didn't really do anything. And then when it comes back to that business case for creativity, being very clear over what time period and at what investment and resource level are you measuring against. And then you can have, very robust conversations. I think when you don't have clear KPIs or clear understanding of how creativity can drive growth, it becomes very opinion-based, right? Someone might like it, not like it, but being very clear on what it did or didn't do for the business is key.
Awesome. Thank you, Vicki. Sophia, any thoughts from you on this one?
Yeah, what Vicki said is absolutely true. And the other build I would have to it is, how do you think about when you're thinking about leadership or stakeholders? Like in our business, I'm fortunate that our CEO, once we get our KPIs and show that there's a strong ROI on the initiatives that we're doing, we get a lot of support. We also need to influence our distributor partners. So in our business model, they actually, like, whenever we take things into the field, it's a 50% investment model. So they will support the work that they can get behind and believe in. And so it's a combination of not only showing them the ROIs, the KPIs, but then also how do you think about bringing those stakeholders in at the right time, early enough in the process, so that you can understand questions and objectives, and that you can build ideas together, or at least make them feel that they're heard. And frankly, a lot of times the pushes and questions are great, so that it feels like it's truly something that the right people are a part of.
Mark, any final thoughts on this one or anything that we've talked about?
No, I of course love the notion of learning and setting very clear KPIs and following through on that. And that would hopefully also prove the business case. I wanted to pick up on something Vicki said a while ago about maybe delegating the mandate to take some decisions, maybe on the execution of certain assets a little bit lower in the organization. I think one thing I like, because you asked about alignment, is maybe post-mortem. So rather than, because you see a lot of companies trying to work with all sorts of guidelines and improvement cycles, and maybe it's nice to think about just doing a post-mortem every so often, every month, every quarter, and then to see, are we still aligned about whether this was on-brand or off-brand, rather than making a very complicated approval procedure. And that also talks to the thing about experimentation we talked about. So that's maybe the one thing to add, that maybe we can overcome a lot of complicated approval processes by just having a conversation as a team. And are we still aligned on what's on and what's off brand and how we can improve next time around? In addition, of course, to the KPI measurement. And then, if you really have a leader that's skeptical of a brand, I mean, of course, there's an amazing set of data that would allow you to prove how it's driving shareholder return or growth. But the alternative is takes two fairly simpler, from a functional point of view, two fairly simple products, put them on the table with the brand, and then let them choose. I think they will have a preference. So, yeah.
Help them see.
They can hopefully convince themselves that the brand does matter, and it does actually build a preference over and above maybe functional qualities.
I love that. Okay, I know we're 1 minute over, but this is a little wild card from me. One last rapid fire. And Mark, thank you for taking us into the actionable. But if we were to build on that, on the theme of habits of creative marketing teams, what is one habit that you would encourage everyone listening today to work on developing as they go into 2024? Each of you, maybe we'll start with Sophia.
I can kick off. Yeah, for sure. And I think I have a tech delay, but I think the habit that I've tried to do is use your social media consumption to immerse yourself in marketing best practices versus, maybe personal things.
Here to that. That's why I'm only on LinkedIn.
Me too.
Better briefs would be mine. one page, articulate, clear. It's amazing how much time people have for lots of things, but not briefs. So that would be mine, please.
Love that. And Mark?
My mind was going between two things, but let me say focus, just be choiceful. Just making sure you're really choiceful in what you're going after, what you're briefing, what you're asking for.
And all three of those answers, if we think about it, had to do with focus. This has been such a joy to be here. I'll pass it over back to the Lions team to close us out, but thank you so much. And thank you for everybody in the audience who participated. I know we're going back into the rest of our days, super inspired by the three of you. So appreciate your time and insights very much.
Thank you, Lola. Thank you, our speakers, Sophia, Mark, and Victoria. Thank you, all of you, our Lion Marketers community, for joining us today. I hope that this session inspired you. And don't forget, there is one more before the end of the year, 5th of December. Put that in your calendar, 5th of December. We'll be back with Fernando Machado and the Work Marketers Toolkit, which is a piece of research that our sister company Work is preparing and launching very soon. So stay tuned. Thank you very much for joining. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.